Hello my guys, gals and non-binary pals, and welcome to a new video by Them for Tells. My name is Raven, my pronouns are she, they, and if you found this video useful then please don't forget to like and subscribe. In this video we're going to do a bit of a trans girl story time about my transition into experiencing medical misogyny from medical professionals as an out trans woman. We just put out the medical misogyny video a couple of weeks ago. If you're unfamiliar with the term and the history, then I definitely recommend giving that video a watch, as we go into a lot of detail about what it is, why it happens, and what you can do to navigate health services and get the care that you need. As some of you may already know, I'm not very well at the moment. My health has been deteriorating since catching COVID in November of 2020. And that's why I'm making this video in essentially my pajamas with no makeup, because I just don't have the energy to get myself ready, get the cameras and the lights ready, and actually be able to talk on camera. This is actually the third time I've attempted to make this video. It was supposed to be like an off-the-cuff story told as I remember it, but my ability to think and talk just isn't there. So I've had to quickly put together a script to lessen the mental load. Ah, God! My fucking head. Now that we're hopefully more than 30 seconds into the video, I can put up trigger warnings for medical stuff, mental health, self-harm and suicidal ideation. So if you have any issues with any of those topics, then please turn the video off now. So this story actually goes back to when I was 17. That's when I first started experiencing the symptoms that I'm dealing with now. I used to party quite a lot as a teenager, and one day I woke up after a night out and I'd lost pretty much all sensation down the right side of my thigh. Thinking that I'd fucked myself up somehow, I didn't tell anyone about this, but it actually persisted for several years. Throughout my 20s, at different points, I had issues with the sensation in the fingertips on my right hand, and often a persistent discomfort in my ribs, as if someone was poking me or trying to get under my rib cage. And again, I didn't tell anyone about any of this. It's funny how little concern you can have over a body that you don't really identify with. At 27, when I started to go back to college for photography, I had an issue with the mobility in my right foot, something called drop foot, where essentially you can't lift up your toes like this. Like it's paralyzed, it just stays down, there's no movement. And this was finally concerning enough to go see my GP about, as I couldn't really walk very well. He gave me a quick once over, and because I didn't have any issues with sensitivity, or so we thought, he concluded that physiotherapy would be the best treatment for it, as it was likely a trapped nerve or something, and not anything more serious to worry about, and I didn't think so either. After contracting COVID in 2020, I've been suffering with what I thought was long COVID ever since. The main symptoms I experienced were fatigue, joint and muscle pain, and brain fog. How this usually manifested is I'd be fine for 2 or 3 days. I would try and catch up on everything I'd put on hold, overwork myself, and then need to take days to weeks worth of rest to recover. Rinse, repeat. There are a couple things that happened though that made it suddenly seem like long COVID might not actually be the culprit. Firstly, I never really experienced the breathlessness that many long COVID sufferers struggled with, that limited their physical activity. I would get hit by fatigue where, say, I would walk to the shop just down the road, and suddenly it would feel like I'm walking through treacle or syrup, like everything would just slow right down, and I just didn't have the power to do any more than that. But it didn't feel tiring exactly, I wasn't out of breath. More like I just gone into power saving mode. Everything still works, just not quite properly. Secondly, the relief that many sufferers experience from getting the COVID vaccine never came for me. If anything, things got worse, much worse, and quickly. In January of this year, the pain was so much that I ended up bedridden most days in like actual agony. The worst of which being pain in my right shin and ankle, the same foot that was paralyzed a few years before. I was struggling to walk or stand. There was a weakness in my right knee that made it so I'd actually fallen over a couple times trying to stand up, as like what would normally be automatic balance was suddenly like lopsided. Like I'd go to press down my right foot and it wasn't there, so I'd go this way. Now when I first had the foot drop, I of course looked online and there were two main culprits listed. Diabetes, which I definitely don't have because I've actually tested for that, and multiple sclerosis, which I also didn't think that I could possibly have, because I was otherwise fit and healthy, and what limited things I knew about MS was that it often required the use of a wheelchair, and I didn't need that. However, as research has been conducted into the effects of COVID and long COVID, there was something that kept being mentioned in articles and long COVID groups more and more: how COVID interacted with multiple sclerosis. Namely that if you have it already, a COVID infection can exacerbate things and make them so much worse than they already were. They also mentioned that there was a lot of crossover between the symptoms of MS and long COVID, such as fatigue, brain fog, nerve pain in limbs, and remembering that MS was also linked to foot drop, and remembering the issues that I'd had with sensitivity in the past, I started to take things much more seriously. So I booked an appointment with the GP, listing in the e-consult the previous symptoms as well as how things were deteriorating now. Now, something that you might not know if you're cis, but definitely know if you're trans, is that changing your name and sex marker on the NHS is a right faff. I handed in my D-poll for a change of name and sex marker to my GP in April of last year, and nothing happened. They didn't change anything. That GP closed last November, so I had to switch to a new one, which meant signing up under my dead name, with the intention of then trying to change my name again. I handed my D-poll into this GP in January or February, somewhere along those lines, with a change of details form, and guess what? Still hasn't been changed. Apparently the form the receptionist gave me originally was the wrong one, and I've been sent the correct one to fill in a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, all this is to say that when I had my appointment back in April to first examine my symptoms, I went as male and under my dead name. And this honestly suits me fine, as like we'd already done the research for medical misogyny, and knowing how bad GPs can treat trans people, it was certainly convenient to take advantage of male privilege, while I could get away with it. Suffice to say, the appointment actually went extremely well. From the symptoms I provided and listing my history, the doctor took everything very seriously. He gave me a full examination, testing my sensitivity, dexterity, and limb strength, and I walked away with a referral to neurology for suspected MS. And then everything went to hell. It would seem that the issues with my knee had only just begun, and the following month after the appointment, my mobility continued to get worse until now I need to carry a walking stick with me everywhere just in case it decides to go. I started experiencing vertigo and frequent migraines, and the pain started to affect all of my limbs at the same time. Now, something else that you should probably know about me is that I also likely suffer from borderline personality disorder or emotionally unstable personality disorder. And for me, this means I have incredibly poor impulse control towards things like sex, drugs, and alcohol. I have erratic moods flipping from manic episodes and deep crippling depression over the course of a few hours. I experience near constant intrusive thoughts, and I have a history of self-harm and what can only be described as suicide attempts. This was at its worst in my mid-20s, but then through a lot of hard work and self-management, I'd managed to drag myself to a place of not visibly showing symptoms. There was still a lot of internal struggle, but I was at least able to get my impulses and moods under control so that they didn't actually ruin my life. That was until all this started happening. My intrusive thoughts became so constant and so severe that I was in constant distress and having regular panic attacks about how close I was to giving in to them. About 6 weeks ago, I developed a new symptom, Aladinia. This meant that something as light as a feather's touch could turn into absolute agony. And one day Alicia came over and kissed me on the back near my shoulder blade, and it was as if someone went in and tied my back muscle into a knot. The pain was so intense and nothing would alleviate it. I just had to go to my bed, curl up into a ball and cried for hours. I felt completely isolated because if Alicia could no longer touch me, could no longer comfort me, then I was all on my own to deal with everything that was going on. I snapped, and the next day I self-harmed for the first time in 6 years. Now this is where the fun begins. Alicia called NHS Direct to take me to A&E. In Cardiff we have to book an appointment. Only she used the name Raven and she, her pronouns. The woman on the phone tried to look at my details and couldn't. Alicia explained that my name had changed and used to be something else. The woman then asked what my sex was, and Alicia said I was a transgender woman, being honest and fair. And the woman asked, have they had the surgery? Now I know when it comes to medical stuff, it can sometimes be relevant, but please someone explain to me how it's relevant in a mental health emergency whether or not I still have a penis. I can change my NHS sex marker to female without having had the surgery. And in that instance, for all intents and purposes, I get treated in all medical settings as a cisgendered woman, unless I choose to disclose my status because I deem it necessary. In any case, the woman on the phone at least changed the name on my records to Raven. So that's what all doctors see now. The cat's out the bag. A&E being useless, we booked an emergency appointment at the GP the next day to see what help I could possibly get to help with what was going on. This time a new doctor, who after hearing everything, knowing me to be a woman, and knowing my mental health was pretty bad, decided that now it no longer looks like I have multiple sclerosis, but instead have fibromyalgia. Now, if you've watched the medical misogyny video, then you'll know that fibromyalgia is one of the conditions that's entered into the medical lexicon to replace certain symptoms of hysteria. Now that's not to say that it isn't a real thing experienced by millions of people around the world. Our pain is very real. It's just that it's a medical term made up to make it seem like doctors actually know what's wrong with you when they've tried and failed to diagnose you with everything else. The slightly concerning thing here is that this GP hadn't actually tried to diagnose me with anything. I hadn't seen the neurologist yet. He just pulled it out of nowhere to override the examination I'd previously had, the year's history of intermittent symptoms, and slapped me with unexplained hurty nervy disease and called it a day. Honestly, the contrast between that doctor and the previous one was insane. When I tried to explain the reasons why the previous doctor had suspected MS, he dismissed me completely and just said, well, the neurologist will work it all out. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. Having learnt that waiting times to see a neurologist are extremely long due to COVID backlog, and knowing that if I do have MS, it's a degenerative disease. It can only get worse without treatments, sometimes permanently. So we decided to see a private neurologist. Similarly, this appointment was under the name Raven, and due to some confusion over this, I had to disclose my trans status at the beginning of the appointment to explain why my records show up as my dead name, but actually this appointment was booked under Raven. I explained what medication I'm taking, including my HRT regimen, and that I'd been prescribed a drug called pregabalin for fibromyalgia, and he snapped at me, "Oh, diagnosed with that, were you?" To which I had to simply say, well, that's what the GP said it was for. We went through my history of symptoms from the beginning when I was 17. I actually had a list that I'd made on my phone, but before I could get through it, he interrupted me to talk about my transition and why I had decided to transition and my history with gender dysphoria. It was clear that he was trying to diagnose me with what's known as trans broken arm syndrome, where any ailment anyone could possibly face, including breaking bones, is blamed on HRT. And I'm not exaggerating. I know someone who was told to stop HRT because she broke her arm and it was obviously making her bones brittle. But even he had to admit that it couldn't be that, as the symptoms started before I had begun my medical transition. He was visibly annoyed by this. He begrudgingly decided to give me a physical examination and asked me to take my hoodie, my shoes and my socks off. And when I sat on the medical bed thingy, he saw my arm, grabbed it and said, "What's this then?" I explained how it happened and why, and this is where the appointment really became a farce. Like, he made the point that, well, that's going to cause a lot of pain, isn't it? As if that was the source of everything I had been experiencing, rather than the result of it. The physical examination itself was very lackluster compared to the first GP. With both, I was told to sort of push or pull my hands, feet, legs and arms as hard as I could to compare the strength between them all. The first GP pushed and pulled back as hard as he could, which revealed the obvious differences in strength. The neurologist couldn't be bothered. He offered almost no resistance, so when I was doing it, he didn't feel any difference. He poked me with a sharp metal stick around my body and on my face, to which I told him that I couldn't feel it at all on my right cheek. It was completely numb. He tested my vision, asking if I had any double vision. I did. Whether it was blurry in one eye or both, it was, even with my glasses. And after all of this, he told me that he didn't think that there was anything wrong with my nerves at all. He very patronizingly told me that of course my symptoms were very real, but that in his professional opinion, they were most likely either psychosomatic, and I needed to see a psychiatrist, or that they were medically unexplained symptoms. Literally the new name for hysteria. He said that he was 95% sure that an MRI wouldn't show anything of concern, and so we shouldn't bother getting one, as they're a bit expensive, and well, we didn't really look like we could afford them. Thankfully, Alicia jumped in at this point, as I was kind of in disbelief at what was happening, and I was just going along and nodding my head in agreement. He made the point again about my arm potentially being a cause. Alicia pointed out that that was actually a result of the Aladinia, to which he responded, "Oh, that's a big word. Are you medically trained?" I mean, what the actual fuck? This guy clearly thought that we were both idiots and insane. Alicia has talked about the stark difference in how she's treated when she goes to appointments alone versus when she's with me when I'm presenting male. Unfortunately, the same doesn't seem to quite work if we're both presenting female, as then we just get double the misogyny. Anyway, as all this is private, he's perfectly happy to take our money for an MRI to reassure us, which depending on when this video is out, I'll be having it either this week or have already had it. So we'll actually be able to see whether or not he's right. And this is the thing, if he is right, then great. It means I don't need to worry about things getting permanently worse. I can take my time with it and explore other options. What I resent is the gaslighting, that I'm wasting the doctor's time or my own by bothering him with this, despite how desperate I've been. Actually, the desperation is more of a sign that I'm wasting his time because clearly I'm over-exaggerating and it's all in my head. He could have said that it didn't look like MS to him and reassure me that I didn't need to worry about things getting permanently worse. That way I could take my time seeking other diagnostic pathways on the NHS. But no, he had to throw his 2 cents in there and then that it was psychosomatic and I was just hysterical, without making any attempt towards diagnosing me with anything else. He saw that I was a woman, that I was a transgender woman, that I was a mentally unwell transgender woman, and decided less than halfway through the appointments that I was an unreliable narrator and incapable of advocating for my own health. And so that's what I have to deal with now. Every time I interact with medical professionals, this is going to be a likely outcome that I have to deal with and fight with. And if any cisgendered women are sat at home and thinking, welcome to the club, thank you, it's nice to be here. Oh, before I go, here's a fun fact. Multiple sclerosis is actually one of the diseases that disproportionately affects women, most likely because sex hormones are protective, and women's hormonal cycle means that periods of low sex hormones increase the risk of symptoms developing. Trans women are even more likely to have it, as we tend to have hormonal weirdness, such as things like androgen resistance, which is something that I probably have. So being trans is actually more of a reason to investigate properly, not dismiss. Anyway, I hope this video was useful to hear the perspective of someone who's crossed the aisle, so to speak, to confirm the differences in treatments that apparent men receive from medical professionals versus when they're women. If it was, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you like what we do and want to support us, then you can also find the link to our Patreon. As we aren't monetized yet, every penny really helps us to keep doing what we do. And if you would like to see a return to healthy Raven who's able to actually make videos properly, then we also have a GoFundMe to help with the medical costs that have been incurred by myself, by Alicia, and Goodest Cat by Whisker this year. Links for everything down in the description below, and if you decide to do so, thank you so very much. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.